I'm going to cover risk analysis, but first, got to review some building blocks of the sensitivity tables that we'll look at. So first, I'll need to define internal rate of return, which is IRR. Don't get scared of this crazy math formula, but basically, this is how IRR is calculated. Usually, you just use a computer model like Excel to do this. Because it's pretty difficult to do by hand since it's an iterative calculation. But the key variable to get from this is that the function of IRR takes time into account. So that allows you to compare different IRRs from different investment opportunities and essentially measure the risk versus the reward of that return. Because IR takes into account the various cash flows throughout the year, even if they're not the same every year, as well as the time value of money. So that's kind of the key concept, is that the earlier you get your return of the capital, the higher the IRR is going to be, because you can then use that to reinvest in something else.
And you're decreasing your at-risk capital, your cost base in the deal because of the return of capital, right?
Exactly, because once you get 100% return of capital, then it's infinite returns after that, because your balance is zero. So that's always the ideal situation, is to be able to refinance and then return all the capital back to investors.
Yep. So there is one important fact, though, cutting in real quick, that a lot of people think IRR is like the end all be all metric, and it's not. It does have its own limitations as well. For example, it's good at evaluating deals like kind of apples to apples approach, but what it doesn't do is tell you how risky that deal is, because it doesn't give you the timing of the cash flows. For example, you can have a deal that's on two deals that are on 5-year timelines, and one deal, like deal A, is giving you a cash return or cash flow returns, maybe whatever 6% for all 5 years, and then a modest payout at the end when you exit that deal. Or you can have a deal that's like zero cash flow, like the first 4 years, some cash flow in the 5th year, and a huge payout at the end. And the IRR will, when that shakes out, will be pretty close to the same. But obviously those two deals they have different risk profiles. Deal A is a lot safer because you're getting that return of capital sooner, where deal B is you're not getting any cash flow till the later years, and then the big cash windfall at the end, which is kind of gonna like wash out the first couple of years. So something to look for is the timing of the cash flows. That's something that the IRR isn't really gonna spell out for you. So it's one good metric.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because it's just one number that kind of summarizes the entire project. So you can't really calculate the true value of it until the entire project's done.
Yep.
So.
Yep, and you just use it as one number, as a few metrics to look at when you're evaluating a deal.
Okay, so one of the ways that we look at deals as far as the risk is through the sensitivity tables, where it basically calculates the IRR for various different scenarios. So all the numbers inside here are IRRs. And in this comparison, on the vertical axis, we have the exit cap rate. And on the horizontal, it's the annual rent growth. So for this example deal, if we assume a 2% rent growth and a 7% exit cap, then our IRR might be 16.3. So for instance, this would be the number that we project. Now, from this number, we would compare various other scenarios and see at what point we might start losing money, which would be 0% IRR is the break even. So for this case, it's around here. So let's say 0% rent growth. So no rent growth at all for the entire project, and exit cap of somewhere between 8 and 9%. Now, of course, if that were the case, then we would just not sell and wait until it's better. Yeah, so it's highly sensitive to the exit cap rate. And another comparison would be the hold period versus the exit cap rate. So again, in this scenario, we're assuming a 5-year hold with an exit cap rate of 7. So that produces that 16.3 IR. And then the break even on this would be at around 6-year hold with a 10 exit cap rate. And if it was a 5-year hold, then it'll be somewhere around here between 9 and 10. So like maybe 9.5% cap rate. And for this table, we're comparing rent growth versus the stabilized vacancy rate. So stabilized vacancy rate means what is the vacancy at the point once you've done all the stabilization value add stuff that you were going to do. So for our scenario, we're assuming a 5.3% stabilized vacancy rate, which is on par with what the market is. And so to the break-even point to start losing money would be if the stabilized vacancy rate is 11% and 0% rent growth. So again, unlikely scenarios, but that's kind of why we want to do this exercise, is so we can see kind of where that point is and evaluate the likelihood of that happening.
Yeah, because rule number 1 is preservation of capital. So you want to see how much of a storm you can weather before you start losing your capital in the deal. So that's why we do things like this, and we'll get pretty aggressive. Like the deal is going to go down, like we're buying it at a 6 and we're going to end up selling it at a 10, which is a pretty huge spread. But we'll go out to that point, like, okay, well, even at a 10, we'll at least break even. We'll at least we're not going to be making money, but at least we're not losing our capital. So very important exercises to do. And on any deal, any size, is don't assume that the market's going to be better than it is today. Always assume that it's worse than it is today.
Yep. And the last one is hold period versus stabilization time. So here we're assuming a 5-year hold and a 14-month stabilization time. So the vertical axis is in months. So let's say it took us more than 64 months to stabilize, which is over 5 years. So that's kind of unlikely. Then that's when we would start breaking even. So yeah, so that's reassuring to know that we have like kind of that much runway before we would start losing money. So what we also do is run those set of sensitivity tables with different assumptions that are in high stress. So kind of to speed up the model. And the result of that would be these. So we're basically looking for the break-even number on all those assumptions. And so these are the outputs for those. And another stress test that we do is looking at the break-even occupancy over time. So in the high stress model, the break-even for month 1, so right when we take over, be around 84%, and it drops to about 79% in year 2. So that means we can have that much economic vacancy, like 20% or more, and still break even. And another risk analysis we do is how long we can last at various levels of occupancy. So this is economic occupancy. So if we have 74K in reserves at 0% occupancy, we can last 2.7 months. And as this increases to 70% occupancy, we can last 11 months. So even if we had 30% economic vacancy, we can still weather the storm for 11 months with our cash reserves. And
is
this
everybody kind of tracking along with this stuff too? And you guys will have access to the replay as well. So if you want to kind of screenshot or kind of pour over some more of these numbers after we wrap up, you're more than welcome to. This is a lot of information too.
Yeah, I'll be sending out the slide deck as well.
I was trying to test that out real quick.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that I see, and we've run into in the past too with our own deals, our personal deals, was underestimating the amount of liquidity and working capital you need at closing. So it's definitely, and I see it on most of the newer investors underestimate that amount. So it's definitely something where putting these high stress models in and then saying, okay, how much cash do you need to have at closing to weather this storm? We do it in our personal finances, like the 6-month emergency fund. You need to have that same amount or that same logic going into investment properties as well. Just a lot more systematic way of figuring out what that number is.
Yeah, and this process is how we determine that number, right? Because we are looking for a certain target break even, essentially. So that's kind of how we came up with the 74. So in the realistic model, at the 74 in reserves, we can last for more than a year. So that was kind of this iterative process that allowed us to come up with this number for the reserves, because we want to target being able to withstand a 30% economic vacancy for an entire year or more, and still, not go into the red. So these are the results of the sensitivity tables at these realistic assumptions. So we like to do this twice, essentially, one for the high stress and one for the realistic, and then compare those numbers and see kind of like, is that going to hit our comfort zone of what we predict could happen? Right.
I think this highlights a huge benefit of multifamily in general, because obviously there's a higher level of analysis that has to go into analyzing the deals. But when you look at, okay, you can still run at 70% occupancy and still last a year, until you hit the break-even point. It's like, okay, well, a lot of people are just, okay, I just want to do single family. But it's like, well, you can't do that with single family, right? I can't 70% rent out my, house, right? Like you've got to, it's usually either on or off. Either people pay or they don't pay, unless you're doing partial rent or something, in which, you can still do this type of analysis. But this, to me, this highlights the strength of multifamily. So you just have more horses pulling, the trailer, right? So
we won't continue. So this book would be What Will the Rockefellers Do? Right here. I'm just about done with it, but very quick read. You can see it's only, maybe 100 pages. And what we're going to do is talk about what this is, what the premise is, and a couple key takeaways that I have on this. So What Would the Rockefellers Do is a exploration, investigation on how the Rockefellers have stayed wealthy for, we're going on 5-6 generations now, when other very, very rich families seem to squander their wealth within 1, 2, 3 generations max. And the author goes into many examples of super like uber rich families like the Vanderbilts and stuff like that, and like that level of where Vanderbilts at one time are the richest family in the world. Like, how did they by the second generation after Cornelius Vanderbilt died, like they were flat broke, right? Nothing left. So what did the Rockefellers do, and what does all these other families do wrong, is pretty much the premise of the book. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So they use, if anybody on this call has heard of cash flow insurance, also commonly known as the infinite banking system. You might have heard these concepts out there. When did we introduce those? Last year, I think.
In-person meetup, right?
Mine, what's that?
I said in-person meetup too, right? We were talking about it at with the books and stuff.
Yeah, the in-person meetup. So there's a book by Nelson Nash. It's called like Be Your Own Banker or something like that. Very good book. And that's where it kind of opened me up to this world of like how these like rich families like stay rich. I'm not talking about like rich like millionaires. I'm talking about like the 100 millionaires, the billionaires. Like, how do they have like just generational wealth for like that old money? How does it just keep going? And again, that book dives into this topic, and it's a lot of the common theme that we see is this cash flow insurance policies or the infinite banking system, where the family itself creates their own bank, and they do that through whole life insurance policies, and they do it by super funding whole life insurance policies to increase their cash value very, very, very quickly, to the point where if they need money for anything, they want to go buy a car, they want to go buy a house, they take loans out against their insurance policy and then set up a loan with their insurance policy on whatever terms they want. And then they pay. I see you, Matt. Thanks for coming out. And they set up this. I lost my train of thought now. What was I saying? Insurance policies. And yeah, they set up these insurance policies. So they super fund them, and they take loans out against them for whatever consumer thing they want, or whenever they want to, there's a business opportunity and they would normally go from a bank for, they take it from their insurance policy, and they structure a loan to pay themselves back and their insurance policies back, and pay themselves the interest that they would have paid to the bank. An example would be you want a new car, $30,000. The banks are giving interest rates of, 3 or 4%, whatever. So then you go to your insurance policy, take out the 30 grand, buy the car cash, and then set up the loan with your insurance policy to pay it back, 5 years, whatever payments, at the same rate you would have gotten from the bank, you pay it to yourself. So you're paying yourself the interest that you would have paid to the bank. And you pretty much, after, it says about on average, about 7 to 10 years to get this thing fully structured to where you can like cut the line with the banks and never use them again. And that's one thing, that's one way they do it. And then this isn't your normal in whole life policy that, that you see on like TV and radio shows and all those type of things, like stock, the stock mutual fund ones. Like this isn't that. This is a very specific vehicle that's set up a very specific way. So you have to go to like a insurance specialist that specializes in structuring these, because they set up a very specific way. So that is one thing, and they get them on everybody. So like I have one, my wife has one, my kids, each one of my kids has a life insurance policy. And then I super fund all those to build up the cash value very quickly. And then the waterfall of that is I die. And then in my death instructions are, all of my cash benefit goes to everybody else's life insurance policies. And every time a new generation is born, they immediately get life insurance policies that have, very high cash values that they have access to at a very early age. So that gives them the boost very early on. And a lot of it's like super tax advantaged, like way better than pretty much IRAs and things like that. It's very liquid. You don't have to report it to as like an asset on your balance sheet. So it doesn't hurt you when you're trying to go get like your kids may trying to go get like student loans or something like that. So you don't have to report it as an asset. It's very shielded on the asset protection side from like lawsuits and things like that. It's very hard to get access to this cash, the cash sitting there if you get sued and stuff like that. So it has many other benefits of keeping your wealth in these types of specifically structured insurance policies. So that is one thing that they do. So everybody has these high cash value life insurance policies that they tap into whenever they need money. The other side of it is the purpose-built trust. So that's one thing that this book here, the What Would the Rockefellers Do, that it covers, that the original book that I read, Be Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash, doesn't cover that. It only covered the whole life insurance policy. So in the book, it talks about what's the biggest factor of how the Rockefellers have stayed wealthy for so long and actually increasing their wealth year over year, where other families, like I said, they squandered their wealth very quickly. And it's every time somebody dies, a typical trust in this country is set up to where somebody dies, the estate is looked at, an attorney or whoever looks at it, and they divide everything up and give it to the kids. The second that division happens of the wealth, it's gone. Like you're done. As soon as it's divided and it's no longer centrally located in that trust, and you divvy it up between the kids and the grandkids, within a few years, that entire legacy, that entire wealth, that fortune will be gone. Because not only are they going to spend it on whatever they want, and probably squander it on dumb stuff, the government is going to take, a haircut, or give them a haircut on every single one of those transactions. So every single time that the money is removed from a trust and passed from one hand to the next hand, down the line, the government's coming in grabbing a piece. So those two things, the second it's split up again and handed out to everybody, and then the government coming in taking their fees, is the biggest reason the book cites on why these, super rich families from yesteryear are like irrelevant now, because of the way their trusts distribute the cash. The way the Rockefellers have it is it's centralized. Like there's like the Rockefeller Bank, like, the mothership, and all the wealth of the whole family is centralized there. And it's 150 people are getting supported by this trust, but the money stays in the trust. They have to go to like a board of trustees, and they have to like almost petition to withdraw money. And the way they do it, say they have it purpose built, meaning the idea is your descendants aren't just going to get money just because they want money. They have to have a reason, and the reason is going to be things like education, for an entrepreneurial endeavor, for things like a business opportunity or investment, for things like a charity cause or something like that. Like it has to either benefit the family, meaning you're going to make money for the family, better yourself, or better benefit society. Like very like mission statement oriented trust is the way that it was set up. So, grandkid A, whatever Abe or something wants a loan for a business opportunity or for something. He has to go to the board of trustees, like, I want $1 million loan, give him a business plan saying, I want $1 million loan for this business idea. And they grant him the money, and it's not even a grant, or it's not even a withdrawal from the trust. It's a loan. Right. So they give him a loan, like, you have to pay this back. You have to pay the family back, and you have to make the family whole for this loan. So it gives them definitely the accountability to keep the family trust going. Is they don't hand out money. They take loans out against the trust, and they're required to pay it back. And then the hook on it is, as soon as they withdraw that money, they make sure that that person has a whole overfunded cash value life insurance policy, right? And guess who's the beneficiary of that policy? It's the trust. So even if that person flakes on that $1 million and doesn't ever pay it back, or can't because they made a bad business decision, the trust will be made whole eventually. Like that person's going to die, and the trust is the beneficiary, and they're going to get the death benefit for that life insurance policy. So having that structure to where you have a purpose-built trust to make sure that your family or your descendants don't squander your hard work and wealth that you've spent your whole life doing, and make sure that it's benefiting the family and society. Put that into your trust of like, these are the reasons that money can be withdrawn from the trust or loaned from the trust, and make sure you have somebody competent and understands what you're trying to do as the trustee. Okay, that's going to facilitate this. And then the cash flow insurance, that's something we can do now. That's going to provide you a death benefit for you, but then also you super fund it to where you can, whenever you want to buy something, you just loan it from your life insurance policy instead of going to a bank. So those are the two things I took away from the book, and things that I'm going to start implementing right now. I actually had a trust drawn up like a month ago, and I just emailed my lawyer today and was like, sorry, change of plans. I'm restructuring this whole thing. Because I did it to where I die, my wealth gets, my estate gets consolidated, and my kids will get, 30% when they're 18, 30% when they're 25, and 30% when they're 30, which I thought made sense. And now it was like, that's the worst thing you can do. So I'm going to restructure that to make sure that they can only pull money out for things that matter and not, whatever, so they can go, buy a fancy car or stuff like that. So